Hi, Jim here, just dropping in before this week's episode to tell you about my latest movie, The Apocalypse Box. It's a horror film and I'd love for you to check it out. If you go to apocalypsebox.co.uk, you can find all the links on where you can watch the movie. Right, let's get on with this week's episode. Hi, Jim here, and you're listening to the Honest Filmmaker podcast, career advice from people in the business. This week I'm speaking to director James Couche. James made a bunch of short action films before moving on to his feature film, Lost Phoenix. The film was shot during COVID with a very small crew, small budget. It's an action martial arts film. I talked to James about the challenges of shooting an action film on a micro budget. We talked about how difficult it was shooting during COVID, the advantages and disadvantages of that. We talked about the challenges of promoting your film. He's also with Indie Rights, so he talked a little bit about his decision to go with them. And of course, we talked about some classic action movies and what's influenced his movie. Enjoy. So tell me a little bit about yourself and your route into filmmaking.
So my route into filmmaking started when I was 10. I saw this TV special about Ray Harryhausen, who made all these great, dinosaur effects, all these great monster effects back in the 60s and 50s, and I think maybe into the 70s. And one of the things they showed was this little stop motion he did when he was 6 years old. He basically made a little claymation version of himself and a little bear. And basically it's like this 20-second clip of a bear hunting him in his backyard. And I'm like, that's amazing. He was 6 and I'm 10. I can do this. Not realizing like, all right, what do I need? All we had was this this rocket launcher video camera that would, takes full-size VHS cassettes. And I had to learn the timing of how long it would take from when you press the button to when the tape starts going and then stop it. So I could actually get one frame of animation. So for about 5 or 6 years, I was just doing these little stop motion videos. And it wasn't until I want to say after high school, I went to serve in the Air Force. And after that, I went to college. And that's where I'm like, all right, I want to get into making movies. I want to make action movies. I don't know why. It's just kind of a thing. And I started doing that in 2005. And in 2020, which is probably the worst time in the world to say, hey, let's make an action feature. I made my first feature-length action movie.
Right. Okay. So you said, I was going to ask you actually, why action? So if you don't know why, can you give me give me some movies that you aspire to be as good as, or that have inspired you to make action?
I mean, I wouldn't say it was probably mid-teens. I really started to kind of discover like action movies through my parents' VHS collection. They would get movies on pay-per-view, tape them, so I had access to stuff like Striking Distance and True Lies and Terminator 2 and The Rock and all these. Just like got really, really into them because I think maybe I just really enjoyed the craft because there's a lot of technicality to it. There's a lot of it's very real world. It's not necessarily like sci-fi where it's a lot of VFX. It's like, well, no, how do we jump a bus across a missing section of highway and do it for real? And that, along with, I think it was what got me into wanting to make movies was Jurassic Park, and seeing this, like, I bought a VHS tape of the making of that movie because from the time it was in theaters to the time the movie came out on video was like a year. So that tape was the closest I had to being able to watch it, and getting to see just the process and all the problem solving and all the creativity that goes into making a movie like that. I think that's kind of like, okay, I love this aspect of it. I think this is really fascinating. And I just started getting more and more into Hong Kong movies and like John Woo. That was also around the time when the Matrix was coming out. So the 90s were like this golden era for Hollywood action. And I caught right at the perfect time for that. And then it all kind of fell apart when they decided, hey, we could just shake the camera around and edit really fast and call it an action movie and no one will know any different. So as I was actually getting into making movies, that's when the quality of Hollywood action movies kind of like took a nosedive. And I was part of this online community of people who were just like, no, we want to do it like Jackie Chan did. We want to do it like, John Woo did. We want to do it like, John McTiernan did. And so we kind of all viewed ourselves as like this, we were carrying a torch for kind of a type of movie that wasn't really being made at the time. And so, yeah, like kept on growing. Like I have interest in other genres, but for whatever reason, action movies just kind of spoke to me differently.
Yeah, I can understand that. And that was a golden era. And I know exactly what you mean about the editing, which is interesting because you edited your feature film as well. So I imagine that's obviously, if you want it edited a certain way and you're directing it and it's action. So are you a martial arts person? Are you know how to fight, or is it just something you're kind of into?
I've never fought competitively, but I have been training in various stuff since I was 18. I kind of always kept running into a problem, especially in college, where it's like, okay, I'm taking full-time courses at the university, plus I'm working one, maybe sometimes two part-time jobs, plus I'm making movies, and also trying to, train in like, kung fu or something. And I would hit a breaking point and something would have to give. And usually it's like, sorry, martial arts, you're going to have to take a back seat, because movies I love making movies just a little bit more than I love like training. But I do try to keep on going with that. Like I recently trained in Krav Maga, really enjoy like Wing Chun, kickboxing, that kind of thing. And it's really great to be able to bring that understanding of like, body mechanics to like fight choreography and stunt coordination.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wish I had more experience in kind of the kung fu side of things, because you look at Hong Kong and like the really, really intricate handwork and the really intricate fight scenes. I wish I could do that, but I'm kind of like, as you can see with Lost Phoenix, it's a little bit more like the old school like Van Damme style of fight scene, where it's like not super complex, but it's high impact. And I also really enjoy that too, because I like kind of no nonsense type of action. And that's what I leaned into for this.
Right. And so I noticed on your YouTube channel, you've done a bunch of short films, which kind of seem like your warm up for this feature film. Give me the pitch for Lost Phoenix. So tell me what the film's about.
So Lost Phoenix was born of a really dark idea that I had during the pandemic. I mean, we all remember lockdown. It sucked. I was very clearly suffering from depression, and I had this really horrible thought. What would it be like if you woke up right now with amnesia and you couldn't remember anything from before this? So this is your reality, like the pandemic, the protests. I don't know how much you know about kind of like Black Lives Matter, but that was like, if there was three main factors of 2020 was COVID, Black Lives Matter, presidential election. It was a very traumatic year. And so you imagine waking up and like, that's your world, is that trauma is your world. And then it's like, well, what if you didn't have the proof of your identity? It's like, well, Homeland Security will probably come and try to like take you away. So like it slowly morphed from this really kind of dark idea into an amnesiac action thriller set during 2020. And the reason for it, kind of being said at that time, is a combination of safety and also a little bit just like logistics. I had been working on what would have been my first feature, but COVID effectively killed it. And when it came time to like, I can try to make another movie, I had been looking at these other projects, these other shows, these other movies that were filmed during lockdown, and it was always weird whenever you'd watch something that was clearly made during lockdown and pretended like COVID didn't exist. Like Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. Every frame of that movie, you can feel the pandemic. You can feel them having to almost relearn filmmaking on the fly. And the movie looks and feels so weird. The blocking is all so weird, but it was all logistics. And I thought, I don't want to do that. It's set in 2020. If guys want to fight, they kind of have to have masks on. How do I make it not look stupid having them put masks on? Like, well, ninjas are a thing in cinema, so let's just pull from that. But yeah, a lot of so the things like, everything feels very empty and uncanny. Well, there's a reason for that. Like everybody's communicating through technology as opposed to being face to face much of the movie. There's a reason for that. So it doesn't feel stilted. It very much dates itself, but not in a negative way.
Yeah. And it's funny you should say that, because when I saw the poster, I assumed it was a ninja thing. It was like, he's got a mask on, he's a ninja, but not realizing it was related to the time, it's period it's set in. So is the because I haven't managed to see the film yet, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. 'Cause the trailer looks awesome. Your lead actor is a black guy. Is
Mhm.
that related to the Black Lives Matter? Does race come into it, or was he the perfect person because of fighting skills and happened to be the leading man?
So the lead actor's name is Juan Dral. He is of Haitian descent,
Mhm.
and what's interesting is he and I met about a year prior. Like, we actually lived in the same apartment building together, and I was filming something, and I came down to meet this actress, and I see here's this dude like dressed real sharp, chatting her up, and I walk up. He introduces himself, talks to me about wanting to be in movies, and there were no roles left for that particular movie, but I never forgot this guy. Like, it's like, oh, like I'd see him around every so often, but like, yeah, like, never forgot him. He made a really good impression. And so when this movie was kind of in its very infant idea, initially the main character would have just been a white guy. And
Mm.
then it's like, well, okay, but no, what if it's this other guy, this like really like charismatic, but also a guy who'd never acted before. He had never done acting. He had never done anything like that. But he had a lot of presence. He had a lot of charisma. And so in like October of 2020, I decided to shoot a proof of concept short, and a significant part of that proof of concept shows up in the movie, just to see like, okay, is this going to work? Can we make a movie during this lockdown? Is he can I kind of direct him well enough that he can still give a good performance despite his lack of experience and training? And it worked out perfectly. It worked out beautifully. And so I'm like, all right, let's go and do this. But at the same time, if there was ever anything like socially relevant or prescient about this movie, it was almost entirely by mistake.
All right.
Like, it's like, yes, you can't talk about America in 2020 without talking about COVID, without talking about Black Lives Matter.
Mm.
But it never really dives deep into that. It's just kind of like, well, no, this is happening during this time, and it comments on it, but at the same time, it's mostly focused on this guy trying to find out who he is while dodging like immigration detention, and then finding out, oh, there's a bunch of like there's this domestic terrorist group who happen to know who I am, and they are really angry at me for some reason. So it just kind of it does that thriller thing where it's like, how bad can I make this guy's night? And that's just kind of the basis for the story.
Right. Okay, so the two things people always ask about
Mm-hmm.
independent films: where'd you get the money from to make it, and what's it shot on?
Okay, so the easiest one is it's shot on a Blackmagic Pocket 4K.
Right. Okay.
In Blackmagic Raw. Really great camera, also very problematic camera, very fussy. I actually had to do a modification on it so that, because I don't want to put extra monitors, I like to run light and kind of keep it as efficient as possible. So I had a mod done where you could actually tilt the screen up and down, because otherwise it's stationary. And that made filming action scenes 10 times easier.
Mm.
But as for the budget, it came from a number of places, but it's pretty much a self-funded movie. So I think we got like $2,000 from crowdfunding. We got a few. Government sent out stimulus checks, and those stimulus checks essentially went to the movie, and the rest of it was kind of like cobbled together from money that I was earning, and it was kind of this fun. I would keep running out of money, but I would strategically run out of money, and it's like, all right, we're going to go on a quick hiatus for a few months, because it was in Virginia. The summers are excessively hot, kind of to the point of dangerous, or like taking a break for the holidays. So that would give me this perfect opportunity to go and find a way to raise more money so we could start. So when we started back up, we would have enough cash. In the end, it cost about $10,000 to make that movie.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't look or feel like a $10,000 movie, which was the goal, but Yeah, it kind of reminded me of my days as a college student where I would have to figure out, like, okay, so what bills do I have to pay and what bills can I, like, put off paying so I can eat this month? And so it kind of reminded me of like being kind of like being poor, just like the maneuvering of funds so like we can keep the lights on, and not starve.
I think you've just described filmmaking, haven't you? That's
That
how can you do this and that? Okay, which one has to be thrown out? This one because this
yeah.
costs too much money. Yeah, it's non-stop like that. Now you said the Blackmagic 4K, which immediately made me think, oh God, am I right in saying there's no autofocus on that? So are you just on a wide lens for the whole thing, or how's that work?
So I got, oh God, yeah. I still, like, to this day I still wonder, like, how does this movie look as good as it does? Because I was using Panasonic lenses, and they
Right.
do this thing called focus by wire.
Hmm.
So they'll spin forever. It's entirely digital focus. So,
Yeah.
and if you spin it slowly versus fast, it won't end at the same place. So
Nice.
I had to get really good at pulling focus manually with these
Hmm.
really finicky lenses, with this camera that did not have autofocus at all. When it came time to do the fight scenes, I would try to stop the lens down to go as deep focus as I could get away with.
Hmm.
But I also found myself using wide lenses because I really like the effect of, when you throw a punch past a wide lens, it looks like it's coming at you. So you kind of like get that more visceral feel as opposed to shooting from like a long lens and having everything be, shallow focus. But yeah, as much as I loved that camera, I can honestly say it might have actually been possibly the worst camera given the style of filming I was doing and what I was actually trying to make.
Yeah. That's what occurred to me when you said it. I was thinking, how the hell? Because we watched the trailer and we thought, oh, this looks good. This looks like it's had a bit of money spent on it. But and I'm assuming you're saying you're pulling focus, so you're filming and focusing at the same time. So that's
Yep.
nuts on an action movie. Um, so then the other thing is, if you're thinking of making an action film on $10,000. How did you handle? Did you have any special insurance? Did you just wing it? Were you ever concerned someone was going to get injured, or were you? What did you do about all that sort of stuff? Because that's what would keep me up at night.
Yes. So um, we kind of winged it with the insurance, but whenever I'm doing, because I was also the choreographer and I was also the stunt coordinator, because why wear one hat when you can wear 20?
Yeah.
Um, Everything I do with a fight scene or an action scene in general is designed for safety. Like make it look interesting, make it look exciting, but also make it as safe as possible. And a lot of these people, a lot of these actors had either never done a fight scene before, or they had very limited experience with fight scenes. And so I worked with them. I didn't have, because of the pandemic and limited budget and time, I didn't have time to go into deep training with them. So I was always sure to like teach them basics, like, okay, teach them how to give and receive a movie hit, so they knew how to react, they knew how to throw without hurting each other. um, Footwork and distance, so that way like they're not shuffling and tripping over themselves, and they're also at a far enough distance they can get like a good extension of a move without being like too close and hitting the other person. And
Mm.
then the third one was rhythm, making sure that everybody's kind of on the same pacing, everyone's in the same timing. And that helped make things a lot safer. And then the other thing was, if we would go in training and like practice and it's obvious that people didn't feel comfortable doing the movement, then I would change the movement. So a lot of people just kind of came with what they had. Like one guy, one actor basically sent me a clip of him doing capoeira. And so I'm like, okay, well, guess what you're doing in this movie? He had never done capoeira for a movie before. He'd only ever thrown like, a couple punches. Like, why? Why would no one use this?
Yeah.
The lead actor he has like long legs, so his kicks look great. So he throws a lot of kicks. The lead villain, you can see it in the trailer, is a good friend of mine who is an Iaido practitioner. So he's really good with a katana. And so I'm kind of taking all these actors' like existing skill sets and using them to kind of the best potential I can.
Yeah,
but
that reminds me. So I've done an action film. I did a vampire action film called The Witch's Hammer years and years ago. It's my first debut feature, and I shot it on 35mm.
Wow!
Not a lot of money at all. And bear in mind how big those cameras are. we rented the cameras from Panavision in the UK, and I was told when we took them that they were the same cameras that they shot Tim Burton's Batman on. So we were that much ahead of them. I was like, oh my God. So we shot them on these big, massive cameras. And I know exactly what we're talking about because I was fortunate enough to have a fight choreographer, but people would turn up who knew how to fight, and I'd sort of be watching him over there, and he'd be doing his warm-ups or something, and then he'd do a cool jump, and I'd instantly be like, right, that's in the movie. You're doing that. That's the first thing you do when you get into the scene is that jump I've just seen there, because it just looks like we've choreographed it all into the film. So sales and distribution, you're with Indie Rights. Did you consider another sales and distribution path? Was it always Indie Rights? Did you speak to conventional sales agents? How did you approach that?
For a minute, I considered Film Hub, but
right.
I had been I was a kind of avid listener of Indie Film Hustle, and like every year or so that he would have Linda come in, do an episode, and every year she would talk about kind of the new paradigm. Like every year was something different. Like, oh, this year it's like, Amazon Prime. This year it's Tubi. This year it's YouTube. Now it feels like Fossum might be the next, frontier. And listening to her talk and seeing also like the kind of the very good positive reputation Indie Rights has, all I could think was like, she's not living in the 90s like a lot of people seem to want to. She's really kind of focused on, what's the next move? What's the next frontier? Where are things going? And so that's why I'm like, no, she's not trapped in the past. She's very much like focused on the future. And that's the kind of person I would want to be in business with. And so, yeah, like they were pretty much always my main focus. I was like, I'm going to distribute through them. And also having gone through them, I've learned so much that I'm going to apply to my next project. Because like the movie itself cost $10,000. I will say this. I think I learned more on Lost Phoenix than I did from the previous decade of filmmaking. It's just the amount of things you learn, and you have to learn like I used every trick I had on that movie and then had to learn new tricks just to get it over the finish line. And then learning about distribution, which I'll be honest, I suck at. I'm not great at promotion apparently. But yeah, they've been great. And I've had other people try to be like, oh, we should maybe talk to this distributor. Maybe I'll talk to these guys. Like I'll do it, but kind of Indie Rights is kind of my priority. Like they're kind of like my first option.
Yeah. And
how's yours? Have you had the same kind of experience with them?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we'd always gone down a conventional route and gone for sales and distribution. We'd done the thing. We'd walked around the Palais at Cannes. We'd spoken to all the sales agents. We'd been promised loads of things. You know what I mean? We'd seen all these sales reports and and even like back in the day, we got advances. It was a big step actually going with Indie Rights, because it is a completely different way of doing things, in that the onus is almost completely on you to promote it. Obviously they've got channels that they're connected with so they can get you on them, and they've got places to put the film, but obviously the onus is on you to promote it. So yeah, so far so good. They're the only sales and distribution company I've worked with that actually send me an email every quarter. Some of them you just never hear from them again. And
I've had too many friends have their movies stolen by distributors. And hearing the horror stories behind it.
Oh, some friends. A friend had a film with a distributor. That's happened to two people actually. They went to Cannes, went up to the booth and went, oh, hi, you're representing our film. And they had to look through their catalogue to try and find it. Wouldn't believe the filmmaker was like, have we? Hang on a sec, let's have a look. Oh, yeah, we have. So that's the last thing you want to hear. So yeah, so I think this has been interesting. The other thing they do, which I found really useful, is actually give you advice. So give you a PDF of here's how to promote your film, and give you a report and say this is what's happening, and it's all cold hard facts. And if you don't like it, tough. You've just got to learn to live in the world where these things are happening. So yeah,
Yeah.
so far so good. And how long have you? When did your film come out?
January, almost exactly a year ago. January of 2024. I think January 10th was the movie's birth. We'll call it the movie's birthday.
Well, the movie's birthday. And have you been pleased with the cash that's coming in from it?
So I went into making the movie figuring, okay, I have a bad feeling that these streamers pay the filmmakers peanuts for everything. And literally everything I've seen has confirmed that suspicion. Like, it's like, oh my God, I got so many views, and like, it's $50. Like that's it. It's kind of rough out there. And I think that's been the basis of it. But also the fact that they give you a report for like the 1,000 or so films they represent, you do get a better sense of where you fall within that. Like, we're like Lost Phoenix is, I would say, kind of toward like the middle of it's very much kind of like falling with the average. But I think that I wouldn't say I need to do better promoting it, but at the same time, it kind of gets harder and harder all the time. As social media is great if you have a platform or a good presence, but then you also have to worry about, did they change an algorithm? Are they blocking? Are they throttling posts? Because, well, why would we let you do this when we can ask you to pay us money?
Yeah.
And then you pay the money, and then you find out, oh, all the traffic it got was bots.
Yeah, there is that.
Yeah, it's messy, and I really do want to try to find. I want to try to find like other ways. I've considered, can I buy ad space on like Roku devices, the Roku channel, because you'll have like, they'll have the screensaver, the Roku City, and occasionally a promotion for a movie or a show will just like go float by, because it doesn't really feel like it feels like social media is kind of a lot less useful than it used to be, and the fact that we don't have anything better is really kind of a bummer.
Yeah, definitely. It is a really tough part of the process to navigate, and it's even more painful because, like you say, working with someone like Indie Rights, there are other people like that popping up that you think, okay, I've got someone there, they've got channels, they've got a route for my film. Now I've got to promote it. Now I can just scream about it to my own family and friends on Facebook and Instagram, but they can only watch it a certain amount of times. So where else do I go with it? Is a bit of a challenge. What's been the best avenue, do you think, that you've used to promote the film?
I went out of my way to try to get onto podcasts, especially like action movie podcasts, horror movie podcasts. So I think early on, I kind of like went all in on that as much as I could, and it did move the needle. But there was also a really cruel irony to it, because the more visibility the film got, the more 1-star reviews we were getting on IMDb. So we basically got, like, every time I would go on a podcast, the film would drop 1 whole point on IMDb. So it's like, this sucks. Like, there's no way, like, even if you don't like it, there's no way this is worth 1 star. So it literally is like people coming in and trolling. And I then would find out from other filmmakers that this is a common problem. People come in just to like 1 star and leave, and that's it, because they don't even have to leave a review.
Yeah, you do. I'm past. I mean, if you saw some of the reviews for the very first film I made, and I used to keep them because they just made me laugh so much, these reviews, some of the things people would say. But now that's all. I miss that. I miss a little review where someone gives you their actual opinion. Now, like you say, it's faceless, and it is a little bit meaningless, because you can go on IMDb, you can see, I don't know what, I could pick a film like Aliens and it would get like a 7. Do you know what I mean? You just be like, what are you on about?
The movie's a 10.
Yeah, exactly. So to rate somebody, there's I mean, to give a film a 1, it's got to have offended you in some way.
Like,
No movie is a 1 unless it's completely against everything you stand for. So yeah,
yeah.
it happens, unfortunately, and I think IMDb need to do something about it, because I think their weighting should be adjusted accordingly, because it happens to, like you say, it happens to every single indie filmmaker. Pop a film up
Mhm.
there, and then you get blasted. And usually, I think those ones come from illegal download sites anyway. I
Yeah.
think, because I've seen chatter on those. I mean, have you had much experience with piracy with a film?
So tons. The film got pirated within the first week, but what was interesting was I would go onto these like pages and read kind of the user reviews, and it was some of just the most vile, like vicious things. Like, what happened to you? That you're gonna what happened to you that you feel like you need to go online and say this thing because about a person you've never met over a movie you probably didn't even fully watch, and or in this case stole, and it was kind of I don't know. It's I think that because I've encountered people who have actually seen it,
Mm.
and or like you look at reviews from someone who's actually seen it, you can normally tell like, okay, did they, number one, did they watch it? Number two, did they fully watch it, or were they scrolling on their phone and half watching it? Because a lot of people kind of like, hey, there's all these continuity errors in your movie. Like, did you watch the movie?
Mm.
Like, did you not notice where these things like the straight up was said? Um, but the thing is, it wouldn't be so bad if that stuff didn't negatively impact you. And it doesn't like that doesn't bother me personally, because it's like, okay, clearly, like, all right, if you feel like you need to like, if you're so like hurt that you need to like hurt other people and whatever. But when you find out like, oh yeah, the poor rating can actually negatively impact your ability to like sell overseas, and you're like, oh, so these like trolls are actually like negatively impacting my film's like earnings.
Mm.
That's when it becomes kind of a problem, because you want to make money so you can make more movies. And when when every time you promote it, like you get like a flood of trolls hitting you, it's hard, right? You need to get the word out, but then every time you do, your film suffers for it.
Yeah, yeah. Which is one of the reasons indie filmmakers need to watch more indie films and rate them and talk about them and kind of share between each other,
Oh,
because
absolutely.
we all love making films. And even if a film, the main problem I think is you're competing with a John Wick movie in someone's
Mm-hmm.
head. You're competing with something that's had that much money spent on it, because they're pirating that as well. So,
Yeah.
they're going to pirate both movies and go, well, this one's not very good. It's like, well, no, you're judging it against John Wick. So, not, I don't know if are you a John Wick fan or not? Hate it?
Oh
Because
no,
is
I
that
I
quite edited,
loved
or is that quite long takes? I'm trying to think how in my brain.
so I love John Wick, but my love for John Wick has kind of dissipated as it kind of became more. How do I put this? The last one just did not do it for me. It's
It was
like this
long, the
movie,
last one,
every,
wasn't it? It was very
it's
long.
very long, and it's
Mm.
ultimately pointless. Like
Mm.
they probably should have ended it at part 3. That felt like a really nice, clean ending. But no, we got to keep it going. And on a technical level, it's really cool, but on a narrative level, it's like it was just pointless.
Yeah.
Like John Wick was the least interesting character in his own movie.
Yeah.
Um,
The thing I
but
didn't like was the bulletproof suits. I can't.
yeah,
You can't have a bulletproof suit. I'm sorry. You've got. That's
it
too much.
makes
That's too much. It's pointless. Bulletproof suit. Oh, hang on. You haven't got a bulletproof suit in your film, have you?
no,
No.
God no. Yeah, I mean, once they started introducing that, and suddenly everybody has them, or you have, hey, we have a guy with an attack dog. Like, well, cool, but we had Halle Berry with 2 attack dogs in the previous movie,
Yeah.
and it felt like they were running out of ideas there. I think my biggest problem with those movies is, and think something I'm a big fan of with action movies, is brevity.
Mm.
Like, there were so many cases where like, oh, this action scene goes on for like 12 minutes when there was maybe 6 or 7 minutes of actual ideas, and you just like, so we're just literally watching John Wick take out faceless goons, an army of faceless goons, and eventually you start to seeing the same things repeated over and over. I'm like, guys, I know the stuntman worked hard, but you kind of have to cut this down. Like this bloated 12-minute sequence would have been a great 7-minute sequence.
Yeah.
Like the bag of tricks they have is not deep enough. It's like if it's a Jackie Chan movie and they have like a 15-minute action scene, like, okay, that's going to be awesome because that guy's got an endless bag of tricks.
Yeah.
But with John Wick, it's like they don't quite have that yet. And, because Keanu's great, but Keanu is an actor who trains for this as opposed to, a former stuntman who can do all of it. And that kind of, over time, as these movies got more and more bloated, it kind of lost me.
Yeah. And what I was going to ask you was, so you made the film, you released the film. If you could go back in time and tell yourself something that you wish you'd known at the very beginning, what would that be?
Take more pictures and have somebody there to do BTS. But at the same time, I think the fact that everything was so bare bones actually helped us with the COVID of it all. Like for the most part, there would maybe be 2 or 3 actors at most, and then 2 people behind the camera, including myself, maybe 3 on a good day. But what that did was it allowed us to not be too crammed together, where there were never too many people there. So we got through almost 2 full years of the shoot without anyone getting sick. It was the second to last shoot that I and one of the actors got sick. There was like 7 of us there that day, which is the most crowded we've ever had it. Thankfully, only 2 of us got sick. Right. But yeah, like the bare bones of it really helped us to like move faster, allowed us to kind of get more stuff, and also to not become like a super spreader event. Like we didn't say, for example, we never had a sound person the entire movie.
Okay.
All of it was done using wireless lavs. And I got to having gotten to see this movie in the theater, I was like, oh, this actually does sound good in theater speakers. How, like, you would never, when I was making it, there was always that concern, like, is this going to sound okay? And turns out it does.
Turns out it did. And just to cover off, so you said stills, BTS. So I'm assuming you want that stuff to market the film with?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because
so that is,
So I'm actually working on the Blu-ray right now, and I wanted to have, value outside of just having the movie. I feel like the Blu-ray DVD special feature is kind of a lost art. And so since I don't have any behind the scenes video or behind the scenes photographs, I'm basically having to rely on commentaries, but I'm doing a director's commentary that is going to just go in depth into just the making of the film, all the tricks and techniques that went into making it. How do you kind of get something like this done for, less than the cost of a used car? Because when you watch a movie, there's a lot of locations. There's quite a few action sequences. There's 10 to 12 characters with speaking parts. And that, and it kind of like flies in the face of a lot of like the whole like micro budget films where it's like, well, minimal locations, minimal characters. And we just kind of threw that out the window. Like, nope, we're going to have a whole bunch of locations, but we're going to film in them quickly. And we're going to have a whole bunch of actors, but because it's the pandemic, a lot of them are communicating through like technology. So you don't have to get 5 people in a room together. You can just be like, oh, well, conversation between 3 people, 3 different locations. It's a pain to schedule those different nights, but it's also easy to schedule one person and maybe one behind the scenes crew member to kind of feed them the other character's dialogue. So it was just a lot of kind of like going against conventional wisdom. We're going to do a Michael Bay shot, the $10,000 movie. We
have a go
did I want to say we did a pretty decent job of it.
Yeah. It's you have to sort of think on your feet and make stuff up. So Blu-ray, so that's interesting. So how are you authoring that yourself, or are you going through a company? What are you doing for that?
as is the case with pretty much the whole rest of the movie. I'm authoring it myself.
Right.
Thankfully, there's a lot of resources online that kind of teach you how to do it. I think I actually have software that's designed specifically for creating it, but you still have to build like the creating the menu video and creating the special features and creating the box art and just all that stuff, which is fun. These are good skills to have, but at the same time, it does get it can get a little bit exhausting. I remember after the film was done, not quite realizing how burned out I was for a long time. And it was weird that like I don't think I really started to come out of that burnout until I started adapting the movie into a video game and wasn't doing every little part of it.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you about that actually, because I saw that come up as a Game Boy Color. So is that's a playable game if you've got a Game Boy, an old Game Boy? Is it? How's that work?
Yeah, so it is. So basically, about 6 months after the movie came out, we released Lost Phoenix for the Game Boy Color. It's a 5-level platformer. Like, you know, you swap between like the two main characters. Kind of the story. You can play the game without actually spoiling the movie because I took so many liberties with the story to kind of make it a more fun game. But you can play it using in a web browser that's available. Right. You can also play it using a Game Boy emulator for Game Boy Color. But also, we're actually about to have a physical release of the game from this company called Project Retro Games. And it's going to be like a 500 unit run, but the first 50, you also get Lost Phoenix on VHS. Oh, which, wow, if you'd have told me a few years ago, oh yeah, your first feature is going to have a VHS release and you're going to be really excited about that release, I don't think I would have believed you. But one of the fun parts there was it's going to be a full screen. So it's going to be like the 4:3, you know, old school TV. So I had to create a 4:3 version of the movie. And that was interesting because the actual format's pretty wide. It's like 2.4. So I literally had to like cut it in half. And for most scenes, it was not too hard. A lot of the dialogue didn't have a problem, but the fight scenes, I noticed they started to look a lot more Jason Bourne-like because, you know, the shots weren't quite as wide. You didn't have quite as much information. It was a lot tighter and a lot more like intense. So it has a different feel to it. So I'm just very excited to see that release. And also the game is just a lot of fun too.
Yeah, no, it's a nice little extra to have. So I was going to just ask you a couple of fun questions just to finish off. So we talked about action movies, we've talked about influences, that kind of stuff. So give me who's your best action star? Who are you? Are you a Jackie Chan man? Are you a Van Damme? Who's your kind of action movie star favorite?
Oh man. At this point, I would say pound for pound, it might still be Donnie Yen. The guy is like 61. The guy is 61, still putting out just amazing movies. He has this really deep backlog of films you can go back into, like his pre Sa Po Long days, where he was doing stuff in, you know, Germany. He was in the Highlander movie. He did like, you know, all this like, he directed a couple things that just are bizarre films. So I'd say he's probably like one of the most reliable for me.
Yeah. And he's in Rogue One, so he wins.
Oh yeah,
automatically.
He's in the one Star Wars movie that hasn't been ruined.
Yeah, that movie's perfect. It's in my top 5, I think, on Letterboxd. Love it. He's in it. Yeah, sold. Okay, so and you don't have to pick a Donnie Yen one, but best action movie ever made. What would that be for you?
You know, I think about this a lot. I would say, for me, probably I'd go with Speed. Actually, I really think that Speed, it understands not just spectacle, but it's also a really like great story for an action movie. Like it's like even the opening sequence would be its own movie in another world, but this is just like the cold open, because to tell a good action movie story is it's not the same as telling a drama. It has to, have a lot of momentum to it. It has to, you kind of have to paint in broad strokes because of the style of things, but also just, it also has enough personality. Like you get to know all the characters on the bus, so you at least care about these people. That, and it's also not about, a sociopath going around killing a ton of people. It's like this one cop trying to save all these people on the bus. And so it's easy to root for and not have to feel uncomfortable about later on. And also just Jan de Bont's, just his direction is amazing. I don't know if I didn't even mention him before, but yeah, that guy, he had this amazing run back in the 90s and then just he kind of went away. I think he's just a producer now. But yeah, like Speed is easily one of the best.
Hope you enjoyed that episode. If you'd like to hear from more industry professionals, how they got into the business and how you can do the same, or you just want to listen to some cool stories from movie sets around the world, then please do subscribe to the Honest Filmmaker podcast.